Okay, well, good morning. I'm here to talk a little bit about geothermal energy. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may know a little about it. I'm hoping to add to that and in particular answer the question about its applicability to NHS hospital trusts. Just to give away the answer to the question that was posed as part of the presentation title, and whether or not, or rather which hospitals could benefit from geothermal energy, the answer is all of them. The question in reality is how much can they benefit and how much energy and carbon can we save them through applying geothermal energy to the hospital. And I'll go through that as we go through the presentation. First of all, a little about who GT Energy are. We've been around since 2013. Our ambition is effectively to be a utility geothermal provider, to own, operate and finance geothermal plants, not just for the NHS but for industry and domestic and commercial use across the UK. As it stands today, we've got a pipeline of 20 to 30 projects at various stages of maturity across the UK. This is a growing industry here in the UK, and as we'll talk a little bit later on, it's a lot more developed in other parts of Europe and indeed other parts of the world. So what we're hoping to do is to leap upon their coattails, if you like, learn from what they've done well, and indeed benefit from the experiences that they've developed. And we've built a partnership of practitioners across Europe that we can learn from and apply on our projects. We're part of a larger organisation, an energy provider. We have experience in delivering projects right the way through from concept. We specialise in the subsurface acquisition of data and turning that into energy, be that oil and gas or power and now geothermal. We operate a diverse set of facilities right the way across the UK, and our business model really is to take away the riskier parts of the operation. So that's the geological risk, and as I said earlier on, basically to be a utility provider of heat. I'm not going to spend too much talking about this slide because we're all here for a purpose. We're all here because we know that we need to decarbonise. Equally, we know that heat is a significant contributor to the UK, indeed the world's CO2 footprint. Statistics, I mean, these go back to sort of 5 or 6 years ago, and as in fact was described by Stephen in the previous presentation, there have been changes to this, but the trajectory, particularly when it comes to the decarbonisation of heat, isn't good enough. Some of the estimates have stated that it will take something like 1,500 years worth of decline at the current rate in order to take all of the carbon out of heating. So what we're looking for are other solutions, and geothermal indeed is part of that. So I ask you, what do we mean when we talk about geothermal? In particular, we're talking about deep geothermal, and in our case, it's hydrogeothermal. The words speak for themselves. So hydro meaning water, geo meaning earth, thermal, heat. So in fact, what we're doing is taking hot water from deep within the crust. And I emphasise the word deep there. We're typically talking anywhere from 2 to 4 kilometres beneath the Earth's surface. And we do that by drilling wells to access that resource, and we bring it to the surface. We all know it's hot down there. There are many locations around the world. I mean, there's thermal baths in the Peak District. There's obviously the town of Bath itself, where those hot waters, they bubble to the surface, and they've been accessed for many hundreds, indeed thousands of years, for people's benefit. All we're doing is accelerating that process, and we're turning it from a resource that's a little bit random, bubbling to the surface wherever it likes. We're harnessing that and bringing it to be a useful product wherever people require it. As I said earlier on, The UK is a little bit behind in terms of geothermal. There have been plants, purpose-built geothermal plants, in operation for over 130 years. The first ones were built in Italy. Italy's got a thriving geothermal sector, Turkey, and now in more recent years, in the last 20 or so, Germany, France, the Netherlands have all been leaping onto the bandwagon. So we're hoping to join them and to be able to harness that resource that's available underneath the surface. As I said, there are a number of countries that have got these in place. There's over 300 current operational systems in Europe alone. Let's talk a little bit about the benefits. I mean, fundamentally, geothermal energy is zero emissions. It's there. It's hot water. It's heat in the crust. So it's inherently carbon free. Once we've got an operational facility, the little picture we've got there on the right hand side, that's the typical surface manifestation of the geothermal site. So as you can see, it's very, very low visual. We're not talking about sort of large chimneys or boiler plants. It's a little building, typically 10 meters by 10 meters, no bigger than that. Because it's a resource underground, it eliminates the feedstock energy fluctuations and the volatility that we're all seeing at the moment. Our business model, as I said earlier, is to take the risk away from the customer. So we provide a long-term commitment on energy price, index linked to CPI, RPI or equivalent, and therefore customers will have a guaranteed cost of energy over the time frame of the agreement, say typically 20 years. Fundamentally, and what differentiates geothermal energy from other renewable energy sources is the fact it's available all the time. We're not restricted by daylight. In the case of solar, we're not restricted to when the wind blows. It's there, it's dispatchable 24/7. Turn it on, turn it off as and when the demand in the customer's facility requires it. So I talked a little bit about the process of extraction. We drill a well down to capture that hot water. In fact, we drill 2 wells, and the reasoning behind that is very simple. What we want to do is extract the water, we take the heat from it, and then we return the water back to the aquifer it's come from. And we do that for very simple operational reasons. If we were just to take the water out, we'd have to do something with it, and it's not particularly nice water. It's certainly not potable. Very, very high salinity, so it's not useful for any purpose. And we put it back into the reservoir, into the aquifer to maintain the pressure, and that keeps the cycle. It means we can continue to operate that for 100, even more years if we need to. A couple of statistics there on the right hand side. We can talk about heat delivery, heat supply in terms of gigawatt hours. So a typical plant would be somewhere around 30, 40, all the way up to 60 from a single doublet of wells. In terms of sort of instantaneous heat power, that's equivalent to about 10 megawatts. And just to give you a rough idea, a 10 megawatt plant of that sort of size is going to save something of the order of 10,000 tons of carbon per year. So we're talking a very significant reduction in carbon footprint, not just for hospitals, but actually for entire systems. A number of those projects that I talked about earlier on are as part of our pipeline, are connected or intended to be connected to district heating networks. Our first project that's on the ground at the moment, we're working in Stoke-on-Trent. We have planning permission and regulatory approval for a doublet of a similar sort of size to that. We're hoping to start work on that sometime in 2023. Actual construction work, so building of the site and drilling of those wells, that will be connected to a district heating network. And in the case of Stoke, we're working with a partner to actually build that DHN and connect up the customers to that. Geothermal energy is low carbon, as I said earlier on. It's also very, very efficient. We talk about COP, a term you'll be very familiar with if you work with air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps. They'll typically a good one may be seeing sort of COPs in the region of 2.5, maybe even up to 3.5. We're talking about COPs in the region of 12 for a small system, going all the way up to 25. So it's massive multiplier in terms of energy efficiency, and that's how we can talk about the sorts of carbon savings that I was mentioning earlier on. A couple of things to mention in the picture there on the left-hand side. If you see where the doublet of wells is coming down there, you'll notice they diverge, and that's part of the sort of operational practice that we carry out. What we're trying to do is ensure that the cold water that we've taken all the heat out of at the surface is returned to a different part of the aquifer than where we're extracting it from. And there's very obvious reasons for doing that. We don't want to cool down our source of energy. Second thing to talk about in that picture is also that we're targeting natural aquifers, fractured reservoirs within the limestone, within the sedimentary rock that's down there. So we're going after existing. They're not pools of water, but water resources underneath the Earth's surface. And the last thing on the most extreme side is they're talking about depth. We will be drilling down to perhaps even as much as 5 kilometres deep. They've actually done a trial project in Finland in the last couple of years, and there they were drilling down almost to 7 kilometres. So these are very, very deep wells. The closer you get to the Earth's crust, obviously the increase in temperature. The project I was referring to in Stoke a moment ago, we're expecting temperatures somewhere in the region of 105 to 120 degrees centigrade. The advantage of that temperature is, of course, it's immediately usable as a resource. You're not having to provide any additional boost. Other parts of the country will be different temperatures. They could go higher, particularly here in Manchester. Actually, it's on a particularly good spot. So we're actually looking at potentially even higher than that. In other locations, because that water resource is closer to the surface, we may be talking about as low as sort of 40 degrees. But I say as low as, of course, that's still significantly higher than you might be accessing through an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump. So the consequence, you'll still be achieving much higher COPs for the overall plant efficiency. Okay, so the UK, I mentioned earlier on, we're a little bit late to the party. Some of our friends in other parts of Europe and elsewhere in the world got there ahead of us. There's currently something like 18,000 megawatts of operational facilities across Europe in a number of different basins. The Paris Basin is particularly active at the moment. They've got 60 odd projects, and they're drilling them at the rate of 2 extra doublets each year. They've gotten so good at that actually that the projects are now carried out under fixed price EPCs. They know exactly where they're going. They know exactly how much it's going to cost, and they're just rolling them off the pipeline. Munich in southern Germany and Bavaria is another good hotspot, pun intended. They've been working there since sort of the late 2000s. We've got a partner we work with out there, and they're working currently on 37 projects, and that number was released even before the reduction in gas supplies to Germany. So I can only imagine what the number of projects within their pipeline is looking like. In the UK here, as I say, we've got a number of them. We've got a pipeline of about 25 projects in various stages. A number of those have matured up. I mentioned Stoke earlier on, which is going to be the first one off the rank, as it were. We're hoping to have roughly a dozen of those in operation within the next 3 to 4 years. An independent study carried out by Arup in the last few years expected that there might be as many as 360 separate geothermal installations across the UK by 2050. We'd obviously like a slice of those. We believe because of our experiences in sort of delivering planning and the permitting required for these, we understand what that pipeline and the maturation process looks like. It is long. We all know, I'm sure, what a a planning application and the bureaucracy that can get caught in. We typically expect it can take 3 to 4 years to take a project from initial concept through to construction. But the actual on-site construction phase will typically only last from 9 to 12 months. A significant portion of that is obviously the drilling itself, particularly when you're talking about going down to 3 to 4 to 5 kilometres. So the drilling in that circumstance could be as much as 9 months to achieve both of the wells. Obviously, in advance of that, you need to prepare the ground, you need to build the drilling site, and then at the end of that, you sort of dismantle the rig, you tidy up the site, and condense everything back down to that small 10 by 10 metre footprint that I showed you in the earlier slide. So once you've got the facility up and running, that surface facility is all that remains. The rest of the land can be returned to other purposes. We don't recommend that it's built over in terms of buildings or other facilities, but because on occasion, probably once every 2 to 3 years, we will need to carry out routine maintenance on the well. But returning it to use as a car park or indeed green space is a perfect idea, because it enables us then to bring in the rigs if we need to carry out the maintenance activities. So just to sort of close things up then, and to revisit some of the statistics I talked about earlier on, we are talking about CO2 savings roughly in the region of 1,000 tonnes per megawatt of delivered thermal heat. It provides insulation from energy shocks and gives stability around price. Typically of the order, based on current prices, of about £2.5 million reduction in gas usage. High COPs. And why is it particularly useful and suited to hospitals? Well, this is all about dispatchable heat. So the more stable your heat demand is, the more utilisation you can make across the day, across the year, of the heat that is available. When we talk about hospitals, and particularly compare those to sort of commercial buildings, the heat demand is much smoother. And by virtue of that smoothness and lack of peakiness in the demand, that gives you much greater utilisation of the energy. Because you're paying per unit of energy, that actually, and the cost is a given, it's drilling the wells, that actually means that your overall cost of energy is lower than a commensurate system in domestic facilities. So hospitals are particularly suited to because of their very smooth demand across the year. What we've actually been looking at more recently is how we can take advantage of any excess heat available in there that's not been used for heating. And what we can actually do is through some clever process engineering, is we can turn that into a cooling system. So we can actually, in the warmer months when heat isn't being used, we can flip the system round and use it for providing cooling to the same facilities. So you're getting double bang for your buck, again, which adds to your overall energy costs, energy savings, and your CO2 reduction. So I guess that's probably coming to the end of things. I'd like to leave a little bit of time for any questions if people have got them. I guess just to focus into a couple of the pictures there. Now, this is very low visual impact. It's predominantly hidden. It's all deep underground. Once the facility is built, you don't see it. It operates there quietly, very little noise. And just chugs away. And as I said on earlier slide, it can be operating for 100 years, even longer. We know the geology in the UK. We've compared it to the successful basins across Europe. We know we've got similar geology there. That means we can tap it and take advantage of it in exactly the same way that those other projects have been able to do. Gives us an ample opportunity to be able to leverage the experiences and the skills and the learnings from those projects. So at that point, I'll draw things to a close. If anyone's got any questions, I'd be happy to take them. And I'd just like to if people are interested in learning a little bit more about the Stoke project, we've got some flyers on the booth next to us. Thank you very much to CEF for hosting us for that. So we've got some short descriptions to go through Stoke. Myself and my colleague Tony, give everyone a wave, Tony. We're happy to talk you through and answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much. You're first.
You mentioned in Paris they're particularly more advanced and we're offering a fixed price performance contract.
Yeah.
So you're not at that stage.
So we will offer a fixed price on the energy. What they're doing, however, because the wells haven't been drilled, we, GT Energy, are taking a significant risk on the drilling of the well. So in effect, there's a risk premium that we are having to take, and ultimately we're having to pay to our financer in order to drill that project. That ripples its way through, meaning the contract price for the energy is higher than it might necessarily need to be. In Paris, because it's effectively an EPC fixed price drilling project, they don't have to pay that risk premium. So the cost of energy is cheaper. But by example, even accepting that there is a risk premium on our financing, the cost parity at the moment for our energy is somewhere, and it depends on location in the UK. We're typically seeing something between £40 and £75 a megawatt hour for the heat. Now that's dependent on a number of government incentives that are in place, but that, as you can see, is considerably lower than where gas is, as an example now, and that's paying the risk premium. So, this is fundamentally because it's those efficiencies I was talking about. We've got a very, very flexible, cheap, and renewable form of energy available for people.
If you come later on, viewing some later talk about this.
Sorry, was there a question? No.
That was really good, thank you. Just in terms of regulatory approvals, yes, there's obviously, how long does that take?
So a typical project, we say somewhere between 3 to 4 years. A big chunk of that, the middle couple of years really, is getting through the bureaucratic process. Because of the way the system is set up, first of all we have to apply for planning permission. Once there's planning permission, we then have to go through 2 cycles with the EA in order to get permission to extract water and return it to the aquifer. So and there's also that establishes an abstraction license in a particular geographical area. That takes a long time. I mean, unfortunately, there's no getting away from that at the moment. We are in dialogue with both BEIS and other parts of the government to try and streamline that process. But that's why we say it's 3 to 4 years, just because of that bureaucratic bit in the middle. The feasibility, the engineering feasibility piece, we think we know we can get through in a matter of months, and the construction phase, as I said earlier on, is typically around about a year. Potentially, there is a process known as EGS, which is enhanced geological stimulation, not fracking. EGS, which enables you. The principle is effectively to fracture non-pre-fractured rock. We're not talking about that. We believe it's too early. I mean, this is very much a pilot technology. It has been hypothesized as being of use. We believe there's enough pre-fractured, naturally occurring reservoirs. We all know there's aquifers underneath. I mean, whether you're talking at 25 metres or 2,500 metres, we know that there are reservoirs of water down there, and we think that's a great place to start. Why be making life difficult for yourself? So the work we are doing is focusing in on areas that we know to be applicable and appropriate, and we think there's actually enough to be getting on there. Let's not make life difficult for ourselves.
Any further?
And again,
So you're much more interested in heat networks, not individual, so like a hospital only has.
actually, a hospital, because of the large heat demand, I mean, a typical hospital is 25 to 50 gigawatt hours. It's got more than enough demand to satisfy a single well doublet. So we think it's a great starting place. Also, because of that nice, smooth demand, it's a great way of optimizing your spend. You get a lot of heat for a particular well. So a hospital's a good starting point. District heating networks equally, because there's a lot of demand there. The problem with DHNs particularly is actually they're connected to quite cyclical users, and as a result of that, you do have to generally drill deeper than you would for an equivalent hospital. But fundamentally, because of that cost, and I guess high, very very low cost provision that we can offer across a 20-year supply, we actually think it will work for a multiple different types of customers. Hello.
In terms of like maintenance downtime,
Yeah. Typically, we'd expect one 10-day outage a year. So when you're installing a system like this, you will have a backup system in parallel for that. But the facility itself, so it's two wells and a heat exchanger that sits between them. It's very very simple. The only moving part within that whole process is actually the pump that sits in the extraction well, which draws the water to the surface. The water doesn't flow to the surface naturally. So that 10-day outage that we talked about really is to take the pump out, do a workover and some maintenance work on it, and then you'll clean out the pipe just to make sure there's no scale build up and things like that. But fundamentally, it's operating for the rest of the year, the other 355 days. Yeah. Any further? Right. Well, thank you very much. We'll be around either on the stand or here. If anything comes to mind, then please do collar either Tony or myself, and please help yourself to some of the pamphlets that were referred to earlier talking about the Stoke project. Thank you very much.